It is Monday, May 12th. Welcome to Fantasy Football Today. Hope you ladies out there enjoyed your Mother's Day. Hope you guys out there got something nice for your mothers or wives, whatever it may be. And we welcome you to the show. We're going to talk about 5 players that we have not talked about enough, including 2 Miami Dolphins. And we have, of course, the Derek Carr news as well, as he is retiring. So what does that mean for the rest of the New Orleans Saints? And what if they have a horrible offense? Well, we went back, we looked at the last 4 years of the worst offenses in football, and what have they produced in fantasy football? Have they given us any good players, any great players? Yes, there have been some good examples. So anyway, how's it going, guys? Jamie, how was your weekend?
Weekend was great. Got a chance to hang out with Heath and Dave a little bit, Thomas a little bit, some former coworkers as well, a lot of friends, a lot of family. It was my son's bar mitzvah, so was thrilled that all the people who mattered to me were there, except for Adam, who decided not to come. But no, it was great to see Heath and his son, and Dave and his wife, and Thomas and his fiance, and really appreciate all the support, all the love, and my son crushed it, so it was fun.
We have a great picture if you're watching, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. A great picture for you in a little bit. All right, let's get to the big news here. Derek Carr retiring due to his shoulder injury. Just some other quick notes. The Saints signed Trey Sermon, Travis Hunter. They had a 2-day mini camp, and he did not take any defensive reps for the Jaguars, but he will next week when they reconvene. Sean Payton says he wants to use R.J. Harvey in the passing game. I think, pretty much figured that.
Yes.
And Colston Loveland is still recovering from off-season shoulder surgery. Not anything that he's expected to miss any time with, but he's not been out there yet. So let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. And Heath, with Derek Carr retiring, who do you want to see be the quarterback of the Saints this year?
Oh, I think we ought to let everybody have a turn. Maybe just rotate one every quarter, or it'd be great to see Taysom Hill in that role. I don't really care. They're going to be a bad offense. The passing game is going to be, I would say, mediocre at best. And one of Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler is probably going to start the majority of the games. I would be really surprised if a quarterback starts 17 games for the Saints this
year. What do you think about Rodgers or Cousins? Do you think that's a possibility for them?
I don't think. I'm very much more skeptical on Rodgers than it seems like everyone else is. But I don't think Rodgers or Cousins are going to be better or significantly better than Shuck or Rattler.
Wow. Okay.
Aaron Rodgers hasn't been good for 3 years.
Did you see Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener play last year? Like, come on, he's so much better than that. Now, they could obviously get better, but Rodgers is so much better, so much more competent than that. And even Cousins is. I mean, they were horrible, those guys last year, like embarrassing. And Shuck is going to be a 26-year-old rookie who completed about 62% of his passes in college, which is
it would be the dumbest thing in the world if the Saints, with the current state of their roster, decided to go spend a significant amount of money or draft picks on Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins. They're going to be bad regardless.
It would be money. It wouldn't be much in the way of draft picks. And that's why I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to be really an option. Why would the Falcons want to try and help their division rival? Rodgers already said he's willing to play for like $10 million, and maybe the Steelers were just sitting back thinking, all right, that's what it's going to cost us. And the Saints can go, well, wait a minute, what if we offer you $12 million? And it wouldn't be that bad on the Saints cap. The real issue, though, is like, what's New Orleans doing? Like, they're a mess cap wise. They always are. They've got a team that's not going to compete. I think if Aaron Rodgers goes there, they'll be on the fringe of competing, and Rodgers will be in the NFC, and maybe that helps him have a clearer path to the playoffs than if he's in Pittsburgh in that beat up division in the AFC North. They'll be in trouble there. If I were him, I'd rather go to New Orleans, but it's not like the Saints are going anywhere either way. And so if the Saints realize that, they just give the job to Shuck, let him obviously earn it. And if Rattler's better, then so be it. But this is starting to look more and more like an offense that I am scared to touch. And Adam, you sent out a note with all the details on how bad bottom 5 offenses are. This makes me scared for a lot of Saints players.
Yeah, so bottom 5 offenses over the last 4 seasons. And last year I took the bottom 6 offenses. There was basically a tie for 5th worst between Jacksonville and the Raiders. And there have not been any standout wide receivers until last year when we had Neighbors and Brian Thomas. By far the best wide receivers over the last 4 seasons on bottom 5 offenses. Running backs, a little bit of a different story. We've had some good ones. Derrick Henry had a top 4 season a couple years ago with Tennessee on a bottom 5 offense. Breece Hall, twice really with Breece Hall, once overall, once per game. Jonathan Taylor was like top 12 per game 1 year. If you remove one game where he played like 1 snap. And who was the other one? Saquon Barkley with the Giants a couple years ago. But there has not been in the last 4 years a bottom 5 offense that's given us 2 great fantasy options. So I would not recommend anybody draft both Olave and Kamara unless you're getting great value here. But I mean, would anybody be surprised if this is the worst team and worst offense in the NFL?
No.
They're in the conversation, but there's, I mean, certainly other competition. I mean,
So
I wouldn't be surprised if it, what?
How does that change things for Kamara? Like, let's say Kamara has been a 4th round pick in our drafts. We always knew there was a possibility, or for a little while, we've known there's a possibility that Derek Carr misses the season. Now we know it's definitely happening. They did draft Tyler Shuck. Like, does this change anything for Kamara and Olave right now and Shaheed? Or have you been drafting them thinking it's just going to be a disaster?
I mean, Olave's been on a slow sliding scale down for me to begin with. You know, it's not just the quarterback situation. It's his lack of consistent production. It's the health risk of the concussions that he's dealt with. And so we talked about this on last Wednesday's show about the group of wide receivers, basically from like 24 to 40. He's still in that group. So I think he's still a number 3 receiver. But he's, you know, closer to the back end of that than he was, you know, at the start of this process, at least for me, where, you know, I was hopeful of lack of target competition, which has really been the case. You know, Shaheed coming back, but there's really not a lot of other players to worry about, even with the addition of Brandon Cooks, who's going to be 32. You know, it's a terrifying situation, you know. So Kamara's 31 or 30 years old, right?
30.
He's been extremely productive in the format that matters most for most leagues, which is PPR. And so even half PPR has still been very productive. But the lack of touchdowns are even more alarming now. The rushing production is probably going to be among the worst of his career again, because I just don't imagine them making him a workhorse to that level that we need him to be that type of rusher. He's never really been that. And then again, you know, just at this point in his career, they did bring in somebody else to have some level of competition. So we'll see how that goes. But the offense as a whole, his age, you know, he's I haven't really moved him too much yet, but it feels very much like, at least the way I'm thinking about it, like between a few of the rookies, you know, Genti obviously notwithstanding, he's been going ahead of, he will go ahead of Kamara in every draft. You know, now Harvey and Hampton and Henderson, like, you know, he's in that range, and that's, you know, back end RB2, which is, you know, probably still going to be good value, but I don't think round 4 is where you want to touch him.
I just think for me, it's 2 totally different situations, and the Kamara one's much, much harder than the Olave one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were a terrible offense and Alvin Kamara caught 85 passes and finished as a top 12 running back in PPR. I mean, he has top 5 upside in full PPR. We've got really no reason to believe that Chris Olave has that kind of upside. Like, he might be a borderline wide receiver 2. He might be significantly worse. So it's easier for me to kind of pass on Olave, where he's been drafted most of the time. I have a hard time passing on Kamara in round 4, just because there's not very many players in round 4 or later that have the same upside. Jamie's right about all the risks with Kamara, but you don't even need a good quarterback for him to be good. You just need somebody that can throw the ball 5 yards.
Yeah.
Saw it last year.
Last year, they were 24th in points per game. So it's not like they were very good. That was the worst offense that Alvin Kamara has been on. In games without Derek Carr, he just had very few carries in those games. He scored a lot of fantasy points. I think it's exactly what we're kind of hoping for, but the carries were so low. They just were not really competitive. So Kamara, all right, I'll put you to the test right now. You said he's going to be in that group, but how many rookie running backs other than Genti would you right now today take over Alvin Kamara?
Again, for me, it's still just Genty, but that's kind of like where I'm leaning right now, is just to move him closer to those other guys, as opposed to he was firmly entrenched ahead of those guys, before the situation with Derek Carr arose. And as we could, you said we've been dealing with this for a few weeks now. It's a little nerve wracking, and I'll tell you, the last draft that we did, the Superflex draft, I was faced with this dilemma, and I kind of still lump him with the three guys that we talked about a lot last year, Joe Mixon or two guys, excuse me, Joe Mixon and Ken Walker. And I purposely drafted Walker over Kamara for one reason only, was the first running back I drafted was McCaffrey. I didn't want to put myself in the situation of two older running backs that, may have some concerns. So I went, just to sort of switch it up. Mostly because I view those three guys, Mixon, Kamara, and Walker, different ways that they're going to get their production, but, high end, RB2s. That he's now behind those two guys. That's the one adjustment I did make. I put him behind Walker and behind Mixon, but haven't got to the point yet where he's behind, Harvey and Hampton and Henderson.
And
go ahead,
Dave. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going. In non-PPR, I'll put Hampton ahead of Kamara, and I think it's easy, and I think we can work Harvey ahead of him, and maybe even David Montgomery. Not that Montgomery's a rookie. 4 games, you mentioned this, Adam, where there was no Derek Carr and there was an Alvin Kamara. He averaged 15.3 PPR points per game, at least 17 PPR points in 3 of them. He had one dud in the mix there. I almost feel like that's the range that you should draft. That's the expectation, is around 15 PPR points per game, unless they do something really dramatic at quarterback. And that's it. And so what's the range for that type of running back in full PPR? That's round 4. And I really wholeheartedly agree with Jamie. You don't want to lock up 2 old running backs with 2 of your first 4 picks. And so if you're going to settle for Kamara, maybe you're going 0 RB. Maybe you've taken Genty in round 1 or another younger running back in one of your first 3 picks. And then you double back for Kamara, hoping that he's better than 15 PPR points per game like he was last year. Terrible offense. You mentioned it. Still averaged 19 PPR points per game. And he scored 8 touchdowns. I don't think he scores 8 touchdowns this year, but it wouldn't surprise me. Heath said it, 85 catches, 85 divided by 17. That's got to be around 5. Exactly 5.
Hey, about that.
Nailed it, Dave. And the other thing I was going to say was, like, the other complicating factor for Olave, and I think Rashid Shaheed still remains a great value no matter who the quarterback is, because he just gets ignored in drafts. The first 5 weeks when both those guys were healthy, Shaheed had more targets, more receiving yards, more touchdowns, more fantasy points than Chris Olave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. It was weird.
Did they pick up the 5th year on Olave?
Yes.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if they didn't, that's a trade candidate.
Well, I was going to say the same thing about Kamara. Like, this is something you should keep in mind. Like, he restructured a deal or had an extension last season. Like, it seemed weird at the time. It still seemed weird to me now. It seems weird to me now. Like, if there's a team that's in contention that wants to get a pretty significant piece, if he's still healthy,
oh yeah,
he's probably gonna be of some interest to some teams. I also wonder, like, he missed 3 games at the end of the season with a groin injury. At his age, it's just concerning.
The Saints will save $18 million if they cut him before next season.
All of my research that I've done
26,
over the last few years has really pointed to this sentence, basically. Good offenses, or the quality of offense, matters more for wide receivers than it does for running backs. And that had really been true as I looked at the last 4 years of these terrible offenses until last season, which just bucked the trend. And you had 3 rookies. You had Neighbors, you had Thomas, and you had Brock Bowers, if you want to count him, who really excelled on terrible offenses. But for the most part, I mean, if you're worried about offenses, it does affect, and it makes sense, right? Like, it affects wide receivers more than running backs, because if running backs get that role where they just get so many touches, I think if you could look at Breece Hall. I'll just end on this. Breece Hall in 2023 was on the 3rd lowest scoring team in football. He had 223 carries, but he had 76 catches, and he scored 9 touchdowns. And
terrible quarterbacks.
Terrible. You could easily see that kind of stat line from Alvin Kamara.
But the difference is, again, he was coming off the ACL tear, but he was, 22?
Yeah.
Hey, Adam.
Yes, Dave.
I screwed up on the salary cap stuff with Kamara.
Go for it.
It's actually, they save almost nothing by cutting him before the 2026 season or the 2027 season.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about players that we just don't talk about enough. We're going to start with Chuba Hubbard, I believe, is first up on the list. Yes, we'll talk about him. We have a mailbag coming up on Thursday. Don't forget about that. Get your questions in, fantasy football at cbsi.com. That is the letter I. So looking forward to it. We have a lot of questions already, but fantasy football at cbsi.com. Contribute to our mailbag, and we will be right back.
From the first swing to the final hole, recap the PGA Championship with Clubhouse Report. Thursday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's get to Chuba Hubbard. We don't talk enough about him. And all right, Chuba Hubbard or Kamara?
Chuba.
Is anybody worried that if there is a version of Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin, Alexander Madison, that it could be Chuba Hubbard?
I think he's done it a little bit of a longer time span, right? End of the 2023 season into 2024.
He really wasn't that good at the end of the 2023. At the end of the 2023 season, he looked like the guy that was going. If they hadn't drafted Jonathan Brooks, you would have been like, oh well, Chuba Hubbard's not that good. Yeah, he got a lot of work, but he stinks. He's gonna be the next. What I just said, Mike Davis, Alexander Madison, Myles Gaskin. Then he had a great year, just a great year. Remember, they brought in 2 offensive linemen. They really upgraded there. I mean, at least 2 in the last offseason. They had the best offensive line they've had in Chuba Hubbard's career, but he just got a lot of carries. He didn't really do anything with them at the end of 2023. He was freaking fantastic last year, no question about it. Yeah, I mean, all right, discuss. Dave?
He scored 11 touchdowns. That absolutely helped. And he averaged 16.1 PPR points per game. I ask you all this. What has changed that makes him potentially worse? The addition of Rico Dowdle? I mean, last year there was Jonathan Brooks, and we were worried about this hot rookie coming in and taking his job away. I think it's a better situation that it's Rico Dowdle that's going to take work away from him compared to a healthy Jonathan Brooks. We know Brooks isn't even going to play this year. This offensive line, you mentioned, it's great. Bryce Young played great at the end of the year. They added another receiver in the draft. That'll help clear out the safeties from dropping down all the time. And Dave Canales deserves credit. He's done it now 2 straight years where he's put together a halfway decent offense. He even did it when Andy Dalton was starting. Remember when Bryce Young was terrible early on in the season and they had to move from him? And this offense is good. And Chuba is the key cog. And seeing him, I think he's a lock to have more PPR points per game than Alvin Kamara at this point.
I would definitely, I think the most likely outcome is probably that he does, but I still think Kamara, if he hits his upside, Chuba's not doing that.
Yeah, Dave, let's I'm going to let you rethink that one, because I know sometimes stream of consciousness, I blurt things out and then 2 seconds later I'm going, I wish I hadn't said that.
We know what Alvin Kamara's upside is, and Heath's right. And last year proved it. Kamara was 3 points per game better. Is Kamara going to be able to do that in New Orleans if that offense is terrible? He's going to need to catch a lot of passes.
He will.
It won't be that way in non-PPR. Chuba's going to be better for sure in non-PPR.
There's only one thing that I would add is it Rico or is it Rico and Trevor Etienne?
Yeah.
Because they added 2 guys this offseason that could be somewhat of a very annoying factor to what Chuba does. And yes, we were concerned about Jonathan Brooks. We didn't have a lot of Jonathan Brooks. That's the problem, is that Chuba didn't have a lot of competition because Brooks missed so much time before re-injuring himself. And then there was really no competition for him afterwards. I mean, we know Miles Sanders obviously wasn't a factor at all. So I just think that if there is a downside to Chuba, it's it's so hard to sort of qualify this because they gave him the contract extension right before Brooks comes back, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
They really invested in him. And then this offseason, they bring in a guy on no money. So Rico Dowdle really isn't so much of a concern, but it is somebody that could just take a few touches away that we thought maybe Brooks would obviously do a lot more of. And then they draft a guy. Look, we had a lot of different people on during the draft prep process. I believe it was Chris Trapasso said Trevor Etienne was one of his favorites, right? If I'm not mistaken.
No, it was Emery.
It was Emery.
Maybe Chris too, but Emery had Etienne in the
top 5, right?
5. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, he's clearly a talented running back. He did some good things at 2 different schools. And we know that there's a passing downs pedigree there for ETN that could be a problem for Hubbard. So I just wonder if, like, what we saw from Chuba last year, to your point, Adam, was his best. And he still will be the lead running back on, yes, an offense that's improving and has a great offensive line and should still have an opportunity to be a solid number 2 running back. But did they add enough competition that we could see that 15.5 points per game come down to 13 or 12? And now you're talking about a guy that's more like, RB 22, 23, as opposed to a guy who could be challenging to be a top 12 guy.
And when we talk about like Bijan Robinson getting 2/3 of the running back carries or something like that, Chuba Hubbard in weeks 3 through 16, right? Weeks 1 and 2, it was kind of Miles Sanders. And then they were like, okay, we're done with Miles Sanders. By week 3, Andy Dalton takes over. Chuba Hubbard kind of takes over. Weeks 3 through 16, he's a top 10 running back. Let's see what he was per game. Yeah, he was number 8 per game. And he had 234 carries. Miles Sanders had 26 carries. Jonathan Brooks had 9 carries. So that's about as much of a domination of carries as you're going to see for Chuba Hubbard. I guess, like, I'm just going to tell you what scares me. He was a 4th-round pick 4 years ago. Since then, they've signed Miles Sanders. They've drafted Jonathan Brooks. Like, they, as an organization, I don't think really viewed Chuba Hubbard as their answer at running back. He's had 2 seasons with a really good yards per carry and 2 seasons with a pretty bad yards per carry. If you look at all of his metrics from 2020, not all, but most of his metrics from 2024, that was a lot like 2022, which was good on 95 carries. 2023 was a stinker. So I'm just not convinced. Like, this is a guy who's never had a 40-yard run. He's not an explosive player. Doesn't mean he's bad. He's just not an explosive player. I am not convinced that he's more than a Jag, honestly. Maybe I'm being crazy, but this guy feels like the most likely player, Chuba Hubbard, to me, to be a bust in the first 4 rounds. If he's in the first 4 rounds, which I think he'll be close.
He's basically Chase Brown on a worse team. Brown was
Chuba, but you would know this, right? Hubbard his yards per catch is awful. I mean, like, one of the worst. But Chase Brown is really good in the passing game. So that's another. I don't know how you feel.
Well, his second year in the NFL, he averaged 12 yards per catch.
Who, Chuba? He had how many catches
last year?
How many catches? Like 12 catches.
Yeah, I just think like Chase Brown is a former 5th-round pick who basically was awesome last year, largely because he just played 80% of the snaps the last half of the season and got all the touches. He's on a better offense. I'll draft Chase Brown first.
Of course.
But Chase Brown also averaged 6.7 yards per catch last year. That's not good.
No, it's not, but it would make Chuba Hubbard blush. I think he's at, like, what's his
from Chuba last year, yeah.
Career, what is he at?
6.2.
0.2, yeah.
After 4 last year. So
all right, we done with Chuba?
Well, I just wanted to add, you're comparing Chuba's 2024 and 2022 with 2023 when that offense was absolutely atrocious. They fired the entire coaching staff after 1 year. The offensive line was absolutely terrible. Last year, they committed to Chuba both financially and workload-wise. We saw that on the field. He was the 7th most consistent running back in fantasy in 2024. I'm not going to say that the arrow is pointing straight up and he's going to finish as a top 10 guy. You said he was a top 10 guy from week 3 on. Yeah. We're drafting him effectively in the same range as Alvin Kamara. And I can't remember the last time I said this, but I kind of like the Carolina Panthers offense. And this guy's going to be leading it, at least at running back.
Okay. All right, next up, we've got Devon Achane. I feel like I kind of skip over him. We take him in the first round in all of our drafts. Just take a look at our most recent draft, and he went 8th to Heath, and I took Ashton Genty 9th, and then Heath said, I think I'm going to flip that. But at the worst, he would have taken Achane 9th. So we love Devon Achane. In 11 games with Tua last year, including week 2, I believe, when Tua got hurt, Devon Achane averaged around 22 fantasy points, 22.6 PPR fantasy points per game with Tua Tagovailoa, which is amazing. So, Jamie, your thoughts on Devon Achane? Is he a surefire first-round pick? And the only reason why I think it maybe not is because he just doesn't get that many carries. And then I don't know how they're going to divvy up their targets if they're going to keep throwing to their running backs this year. But yeah, easy first round pick for you, Devon Achane?
Not easy, but he's certainly in the conversation from like 10 through 15 overall picks. Just depends on, I think, where you stack him up against the receivers. But he's a top 5 running back or top 6 of this worst case scenario. The last question you asked, how they're going to divvy up their carries. I mean, this is his first opportunity without Raheem Mostert. So, how does this go for the rest of the guys? Is it going to be a retread guy like Madison? Is it going to be a second-year guy like Jaylen Wright? Is it going to be a rookie in Ollie Gordon? How are they going to give those opportunities to the next guy? And that's what I think we have to find out. Or is it going to be, all right, Achane, it's your job. Full go. Let's see it. So then he may be a top 3, if not number 1 running back, based on the numbers that he produced with Tua and if Tua stays healthy. So his role in the passing game, I think, is something you can hang your hat on and say this could be one of the next, if not the best pass-catching running backs in the league. We know how this Dolphins offense wants to operate, get the ball out quick. And he was such a huge weapon when Tua was healthy. So that's the risk you play is, Tua's health concerns because he was terrible when Tua wasn't there. But, whether it's Zach Wilson or if they decide to, go crazy and change things up again with Quinn Ewers, then we could see, who knows how that'll go. But anyway, let's not worry about that until it happens. I think when you're drafting Achane, you're drafting him with the upside of what he did when Tua was there. A guy entering year 3 based on the explosiveness that he showed his first 2 seasons. I mean, he could easily be the best running back in fantasy. He's got that much upside.
If I said how are they going to divvy up the carries, I actually meant how are they going to divvy up the targets. I mean, his role in the passing game, Jamie, you seem to think it's there to stay. I just wonder, are they going to go back to throwing the ball to their wide receivers? It's just a huge question in fantasy to me is where does Tua throw the ball? Who does he throw it to? Because we're going to talk about Jaylen Waddle in a bit. My gosh, his targets were miserable last year. So Dave, where are you at on Achane? And give me what do you think his carries? So last year, let's look at his 11 games with Tua. He's on pace for 221 carries and 104 catches. What do you think is realistic this year for carries and catches?
I think that the pace for carries is maybe a tad lower than what it was based on what you just said, and the catches could be a lot lower. I think he's the main guy. I think they want him to be the main guy, but my guess is that they're still concerned about Achane missing time. And so Jaylen Wright's going to take some work. They drafted another running back. Maybe that guy gets in there. There's going to be somebody to help him out in that backfield. But how can they move? How can they do anything but try and get the ball in his hands when he's such a good playmaker, especially as a pass catcher, especially if they're trying to get the ball out quick? So, and I guess the other thing to bring up, I don't know how good you're going to feel about the Dolphins' backup quarterback situation, but compared to last year, I think Zach Wilson is a slight upgrade, and maybe that would help Achane average 12 PPR points per game if Tua were to miss time. Last year was under 10 PPR points per game when Tua did not start. That's awful.
Yeah.
And we know how good he was when Tua did start. I think you draft Achane. If you can get him in round 2, then you thank your lucky stars. But if you get him in late round 1, I don't think it's so bad in PPR. And I still think he's going to be, main component of this offense, catch a lot of passes, scores a lot of touchdowns, has a lot of game-breaking plays.
All right, I'm going to give the numbers one more time. 11 games with Tua, 22.6 PPR fantasy points per game, which is super elite. 221 carry pace, 104 catch pace, 1,779 total yards, 16 touchdowns. That was his pace, right? So just amazing. What are your projections for Achane?
218 rush attempts, 66 catches on 83 targets, 1,705 yards.
Wow.
And 14 touchdowns.
Okay.
He is one of 3 running backs I project to score 300 PPR fantasy points over 17 games. Saquon and Bijan are the other 2.
Do you want a quick stat that Heath, it's in reference to what Heath would always talk about with Achane a year ago.
Yeah, what?
Heath's the one that kind of uncovered that when the Dolphins were in a blowout, Achane went nuts, whether they were getting blown out or they were the ones kicking butt. Dolphins have had 15 one-score games, win or loss, in the past 2 years. Achane's played in 12 of those games. He's been over 18 PPR points 4 times in those 12 games. Do we need blowouts for Devon Achane to be really good for fantasy? And that could happen because this Dolphins defense on paper, outside of their pass rush, could be pretty gross.
I think the one thing that I look at with the situation, not necessarily just Achane. You have 2 years ago Raheem Mostert leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns. You have last year Devon Achane, what he did when Tua was healthy. Mike McDaniel came to this team as the running backs coordinator from San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan. Like there's a pretty good track record of what this backfield can produce.
Yeah.
And so Achane, based on Heath's projections, is the lead guy by a mile. Obviously, he told you, what did you say, 1 of 3 with over 300 PPR points.
Yep.
There's so much upside here. Like it's in your best interest to try to target him, but it's also in your best interest trying to get pieces of this backfield, whoever the number 2 guy may be. And again, it's right now, I think a little wide open who could be the second guy, because Madison, for what it's worth, is going to be the guy that may end up with the role just as the veteran guy. Ollie Gordon 2 years ago was Doak Campbell. I forget the word. To be the best running back in the country before bad, 2024. And Jaylen Wright was a guy that they traded up for last year to get in the 3rd round. So there's a lot of moving parts here that could be, very interesting.
Jamie, let's play a game. It's called Name That Doak.
Okay.
One of them is the award that goes to the best running back. One of them is Florida State Stadium. Doak Walker, Doak Campbell. What do you think?
Doak Walker is the running back. Doak Campbell's the
Yeah, there you go. I had to look it up because you really confused me.
I confused myself. Yeah, but again, I think this is a backfield that's going to have a lot of success, and Achane right now looks like a superstar.
All right. Before we go to break, we got a funny picture for you here. We got 3 more players to talk about: Tony Pollard, Jaylen Waddle, and Jordan Love. But unfortunately, I did miss the festivities. I would have worn my Rodney Hampton jersey if I had known. But look at Jamie, Dave, and Heath at the bar mitzvah in their jerseys. Jamie, you got 2 Shaq jerseys there. Lakers and Magic, and Dave representing.
Oh, no, you. Oh, my God.
What?
You are the worst. First off, I don't know what's funny about the picture. It's just a nice picture. Second, there's 2 Magic jerseys, but not 2 Shaq jerseys.
What was Shaq on the Lakers? 33?
Oh my God!
No, that would be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You idiot.
4? I'm really bad with numbers. All right, so that's Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Ray Lewis.
We all had a 2.
Yeah. How about that? Oh, that is a bad miss on my part. Magic Johnson should have been 32. He should have been like a single-digit number. That's a really cool picture. I love it. So take us through it, Jamie. What do you want to say about this moment?
So the party was supposed to be at a basketball gym. It got moved to Dave & Buster's last minute from some unfortunate circumstances, but worked out great. And the theme of the party was jeans and jerseys. So as you see, we all kept to the theme. All the attendees did for the most part. And so I said, Dave's jersey is great. I was telling my son that of the jerseys there, like Heath was one of the 5 that stood out to me. So really impressed with, and Heath can tell the story of who it belongs to.
Oh, it's not actually my jersey. I just wear my son's clothes now. And he has the retro Shaq jersey. He was wearing a Ja Morant Vancouver Grizzlies jersey. So yeah, he's got a few jerseys. He's started to pass down some of his clothes that he feels like don't fit him anymore. So it was nice to get to wear one of his jerseys.
Hand me down some of your son. I'm coughing too much. Let's take a break. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Get ready.
Wait a second. I thought we were going tubing.
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and Knuckles are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
And everyone loves it.
Every adventure,
Just try to keep up.
every face-off,
This ends now.
and every moment that will have you saying,
Where have you been? My entire life!
It's showtime.
all 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the entire Sonic universe are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Let's talk about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was the number 22 running back per game in PPR last year. He was on pace for 276 carries, 44 catches, and let's see, about 1,400 total yards and only 5 touchdowns. So not a lot of touchdowns for Tony Pollard. In fact, something like all the running backs who had a certain amount of carries, I guess I want to say 260 or more carries, he and Aaron Jones had the fewest rushing touchdowns. But Pollard, again, RB22 per game last year in PPR. That's kind of where I had seen him being drafted. Probably a little bit later now because of the rookies. So we're talking about outside the top 24. Heath, I'll give you the first word on Tony Pollard. How do you feel about him?
I think he belongs right in the mix with all of the rookie running backs. I think he's probably more likely to finish the year as a top 20 running back than most of the rookies, but less likely to make that leap into the top 12. His numbers were skewed a little bit by the time that Tyjae Spears missed. And a lack of touchdowns is really nothing new for Tony Pollard. He has one season with more than 6 rushing touchdowns in his career. So I don't think you really project a big touchdown total. I do think, just looking at my projections, I've got him at 254 rush attempts, 44 catches, 1,300 yards, and just right around 14 fantasy points per game.
All right, the Tyjae Spears factor. So Spears played in 12 games. He played in 11 games with Tony Pollard, but in 2 of those 11 games, Spears barely played. So that was 9 Pollard games with a normal Tyjae Spears, and in those games, you're talking about a pace of 236 carries, 43 catches. In games without Spears or with Spears barely playing, you're talking about a pace of 328 carries and 44 catches. So the catches were the same, but we're looking at almost 100 more carry pace for Tony Pollard. So I really thought that was relevant. They split, they had a pretty decent split. And then when Spears didn't play, they did not use any other running back. It was basically all Pollard. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not really. So it was, so it was only 11.6 PPR fantasy points per game in those 9 games that Pollard played with Tyjae Spears playing a normal snap share. 11.6 PPR fantasy points per game. That's not good. By the way, he was RB 31 in our most recent draft. Dave, your thoughts on Pollard?
Over the last 2 seasons, he's had 15 or more touches in 23 games, and he's had 15 or more PPR points in 15 of them. How many games is he going to get 15 plus touches this year? And that's a number that concerns me. Could he do it in half of his games? Maybe. Yeah, I mean, he's in an interesting spot because Tennessee could be on that same path that Carolina was on a year ago. Their offensive line, they've added some veterans this offseason. They had some good young players already on that line. Should be a better offensive line. They don't have a quarterback missing targets by 10 yards under center. At least I hope they don't for the second year in a row. So it should be a little bit better of a passing offense. Maybe that gives them longer drives and more opportunities to run the football. That's a plus. But this is a running back I don't want to draft anywhere remotely close to his ceiling. I want to draft him at the floor. That means I'm not drafting him as one of the first 24 running backs off the board. If I can get him after 24 plus running backs go off the board, and maybe he's my 3rd running back or desperate situation, I just need a guy to start the year as my RB2. Yeah, I'm good with it. But this is round 7. This is not somebody I'm targeting by any stretch.
Yeah, to Dave's point, Jamie, the Titans ran the fewest plays in the NFL inside the 5-yard line. That's another reason why he didn't score a lot of touchdowns. So, could he, like Chuba Hubbard, benefit from being on a better offense? Excuse me. The Panthers went from the worst offense in the NFL to 20th. It's a huge jump. I don't know if the Titans were the worst. I don't think they were the worst in the NFL last year, but they weren't good. Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard went after Isaiah Pacheco and Aaron Jones. He also went after Ramondre Stevenson in the draft we just did. So compare him to those guys: Pacheco, Jones, Ramondre.
Rather have him over all those guys.
Yep.
I think in the case of Pollard, it's going to be one of my favorite draft picks this year. And so is Tyjae Spears, just to get a piece of this backfield, because I think there's plenty of upside here. But Pollard is the one that's going to go first, and you can get a great, flyer essentially on Spears. I sent you this tweet, Adam, last week. It was from Fantasy Points Data. that Tony Pollard is ranked by yards after contact per attempt. In 2021, he was first. This is a minimum of 125 carries. 2021, he was first. 2022, he was second. Broke his leg at the end of 2022. In 2023, he was 23rd in that metric. And 2024, he was fourth.
Wow. Yeah.
3 of the last 4 years, he's fourth in terms of yards after contact per attempt.
Okay.
Pretty solid running back. And I think in a situation, as Dave illustrated, much better environment around him. I don't think we saw how good the Callahan influence could be as one of the best offensive line coaches in NFL history. And his son and the offense of maybe that they're going to hopefully showcase this year. So the scary part about this team is the receiving core stinks, and it's a rookie quarterback. So how much of 8-man boxes are they going to see? I would assume a lot, but I think Pollard, based on what he is able to do, and hopefully distance himself a little bit from Spears, and where you're getting him. I mean, if you're getting him after those other guys, I think that's just amazing value. So he's a borderline top 24 guy for me. By the time this is all over, he may sneak into the top 24. Won't get much higher than that, but I really like the setup for him based on, I think, how people will sort of view him, and hopefully you get him at a great price.
All right, let's talk about Jaylen Waddle here. How can you got somebody try to convince me on Jaylen Waddle? He was not even a top 50 wide receiver per game last year. He was 49th overall in full PPR. If you just look at the games with Tua, there were 11 games with Tua. He had 9 healthy games, Waddle, because he missed one and he left one early. Those 9 healthy games with Tua, he's on pace for 96 targets. When it comes to Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, Jaylen Waddle, he has the fewest red zone targets. He has the fewest green zone targets. He had only 2 end zone targets and 2 green zone targets in his 9 healthy games with Tua. He was 4th fiddle. I don't know. Does anybody want to try to get me excited to draft Jaylen Waddle?
Tyreek Hill misses half the season, and Jaylen Waddle is the number 1 receiver for the Dolphins without any competition besides Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane.
That's the path. And that's why he comes out as wide receiver 46 in my projections, but I push him up to wide receiver 38 in the rankings just because Tyreek Hill was not particularly good last year, has had some off the field incidents this offseason, and is at the age where he could fall off a cliff. And so if something happens to Hill, Waddle could be awesome.
Dave, you want to make any case? How do you feel about him?
I'm scared I'm the high guy on him, and I don't want to be. He's definitely not going to be the top target getter as long as Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill. And only 3 games last year when Tyreek and Achane were both on the field and Waddle had 15 plus PPR. Just 3. Guess what? That was an improvement over 2023 when he had 0. I was not high on him at all last year. I am hoping, and I talked about this last week, I'm hoping that the Dolphins try to reconfigure their offense so it's not dink to Achane, dunk to Jonnu. I'm hoping that Tyreek and Waddle are a little bit more involved. I'm hoping that Waddle gets more than 5.5 targets per game. I'm hoping that Tua stays healthy. I'm hoping the offensive line does a little bit better. But you see the word that I'm saying, or you hear the word I'm saying, it's hope. And so as long as we're only hoping and we don't have any concrete evidence that, all right, yeah, Waddle's going to have a big year. Never mind the fact that he's been banged up like every year. Like I've gone to their training camp and he's in sweatpants. I'm definitely concerned, A, that I'm the high guy. I don't want to be the high guy. And B, that he's going to underwhelm again. The nice thing about it, Adam, is that we're not – other people last year were taking him round 3, round 4. I don't think anybody's going to do that this year. No. I think he's going to be somebody that falls into that round 6-ish range at the absolute earliest.
That is where he went in our most recent mock draft. Jaylen Waddle, he went after DK Metcalf. He went after Chris Olave. Who would you guys rather have, Olave or Waddle?
Waddle.
Olave.
I've got Waddle higher. Here's one for you. Waddle or Pickens?
Pickens.
Waddle.
I've got Waddle ahead of Pickens right now. I could easily see myself in full PPR putting Pickens ahead of Waddle. I'm going to do that.
Man, it's frustrating because Waddle, top 10 pick, right, in the NFL draft. Is he in the top 10, I think?
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because he went ahead of Devontae Smith. That's right. So top 10 pick, rookie year, 1,000 yards, 104 catches, 1,015 yards, 6 touchdowns as a rookie. Second year, 75 catches, 1,356 yards, 8 touchdowns on only 117 targets. Like, how could this guy not be great? Right? I mean, everything about him says he's great. Then 2023, he has a disappointing year, but he's still wide receiver 22 per game. He left some games injured, didn't play as many snaps, he didn't run as many routes, but his per route data was still very good. I think it may have even been better than 2022 in some cases. So I think that's why some of us, myself included, were excited about Waddle. And then last year, he just didn't throw to him. It was too much Jonnu, too much Achane, like you said. At least we're still talking about a player who's been great. Right. So that's why I said earlier.
There's huge upside here. It's just probably going to take an injury for that to happen, whether it's Tyreek or Jonnu, or to Dave's point, I guess it shouldn't necessarily be injury related. But, if they go back to being a little bit more wide receiver friendly and throwing the ball down the field and, giving him those chances. But really, I think the path to stardom is injury related. Like if Tyreek, this wrist injury is keeping him off the field, as maybe should have last year. Like, he could be a monster, Waddle.
I really think the Dolphins are the most interesting fantasy team because they obviously could have a great offense, right? They were second in scoring in 2023, and they averaged about, I think, 24 points per game. They averaged the same amount of points per game as the Eagles did in those 11 Tua games. Like, they averaged 24 points per game. That's what the Eagles averaged for the full season. So they were so bad without Tua. But they can obviously be a great offense. They can obviously give us elite fantasy players. But how is really like Jonnu Smith? Is he really going to be that better than Jaylen Waddle? That's insane.
I'm going to need a Dolphins fan to help me with this one. But why did they not give Waddle some of those targets? The same type of targets, short area throws, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands fast. Why put the ball in Jonnu Smith's hands instead of Jaylen Waddle's hands?
I don't know.
Maybe it's because the coaching staff was worried about Waddle getting hurt. He might not have been at 100% at any point in the year. This is conjecture. I don't know. But this is something that the coaching staff should try and solve, because there's no question about the talent of this guy when he's healthy.
All right, let's talk about Jordan Love. There's no question about the talent of him when he's healthy either. And he really wasn't fully healthy last year. He sprained his MCL in week 1, and he averaged 5.5 rushing yards per game, down from 14.5 rushing yards per game. And that's a pretty big difference. He went from 247 rushing yards in 17 games in 2023 to 83 rushing yards in 15 games in 2024. Jordan Love went from top 7 quarterback per game to 17th per game. Heath, maybe it's your influence. I know you're not a huge Love guy, but I don't even look at him in drafts. I don't even consider him. It would have to be one of those situations where he just falls and falls and falls. I'm like, oh, Jordan Love's there. Okay, I'll take him. But I think maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's basically where I was last year, because you had to draft him as a top 6, 7, 8 quarterback. Now it's free money. Like, it's double-digit rounds. It's usually outside of the top 12 quarterbacks. I've already drafted him a couple of times. I think he is, and just like the borderline QB1. And I still put Jared Goff in that same territory, especially with an offensive coordinator change. There's lots of guys. You want to take a shot on an Anthony Richardson or a Justin Fields? Take a Jordan Love too. Like, he fits pretty well. He's probably going to finish somewhere between, I would guess, 8th and 18th in fantasy points per game at the quarterback position. It's a pretty bad combination to run less than you did the year before and throw 10 fewer passes per game than you did the year before. It's hard to overcome that. I expect the pass volume to come up a little bit, but he's probably a little bit responsible for that as well. He does throw too many interceptions, and he's got to make a little better decision-making there. And hopefully he now has a number 1 wide receiver in Matthew Golden. But there's a reason I think we haven't talked about him, is because we all kind of view him the same way, as just like, sure, he's a borderline QB1.
Does anybody view Jordan Love as having big upside, as a guy who finished as QB7 per game in 2023? And not just that, he finished the season. He went on some crazy run where it looked like he was really breaking out. Does anybody see that kind of upside for him?
Not that kind of upside. No.
Matthew Golden change any of that?
No.
Okay. Just, what's interesting is Jordan Love basically had the same exact passer rating in 2023 as he did in 2024. But as Heath mentioned, two big things, like didn't run and 10 fewer pass attempts a game, or is that just approximate? But either way.
I think it was 10 fewer pass attempts per game. And like the other thing is, and we talked about this going into last year, he had 4 rushing touchdowns on 50 attempts in 2023. And the QB7 thing, like it's technically, well, I don't know if it's technically true. I had him at QB8, but it's QB7 or QB8. But that's a range also where there's a lot of guys who, if they happen to have 4 rushing touchdowns instead of 3, might have been in that position.
There's a very short window last year when he came back. Remember, he hurt his knee in Brazil, missed 2 games. When he came back in week 4 through week 7, he averaged 36.3 attempts per game. That's more than he did in 2023. He averaged 28 fantasy points per game. It's easily his best split of the season, but he got hurt again. And when he came back, I don't think he was throwing nearly as many passes per game. And his numbers cratered after that. And his receiving core wasn't healthy. We know that too. So it's another one of those situations where it's almost like everything's got to be right. He's got to stay healthy. The line's got to protect him. Receivers have to stay healthy. For this year, Matthew Golden's going to have to keep, ascending. We saw him ascend at Texas. Now he's got to do it again as a rookie. It's kind of a tough case for Love when you see all of these other quarterbacks that are going to be available in the late rounds. They could get around 20 to 21 fantasy points per game. They've got the upside to get close to 25. You can see it with guys like Drake May and certainly Dak and Brock Purdy and all those guys, some of the rushing quarterbacks. So why choose Love unless it's a super flex? Why target him? You can just kind of leave him toward one of your last few picks.
Why choose Love? Is that really something we want to be saying on this podcast?
Why fall in love?
All you need is Love.
It's going to be expensive.
All you need is Love, Jamie. He didn't even get drafted in our last draft. Are we going too far taking a guy like Drake May over Jordan Love?
Well, I think in one quarterback leagues, to Heath's point, especially if you know who you're drafting with, you take a guy like Drake May, like an Anthony Richardson, like a Justin Fields, and the upside for those guys, I think, is higher than what Jordan Love will give you, but the floor is certainly safer for Love. I mean, Drake May, if his 17-game pace would have been RB or QB3 in terms of rushing yards behind Lamar and Jane Daniels, so there's that potential of what he can be now that he has an improved receiving core. So yes, I would rather have Drake May than Jordan Love. I think in what the big thing for Love, and I don't recall this exactly, but I know Aaron Jones was really banged up in 2023, and that stretch of games where Love took off didn't have a run game. And, the addition of Josh Jacobs and what LaFleur's offense was. I mean, you think about the end of the Rodgers tenure, Rodgers wasn't a great fantasy quarterback. So it's kind of just, I think, what this offense is. It's a balanced offense. It's going to, try and, win games throwing the ball when they have to, not necessarily because they necessarily want to. But then again, you see this offseason, first-round pick, wide receiver, third-round pick, wide receiver. They may get Christian Watson back at some point late in the season, but it's a receiving core that's changing a lot. And so I think when you look at what they want to do, no matter what Josh Jacobs said, go get a number 1 receiver, do they really have one? And so if they have an alpha and maybe somebody who can dominate, like maybe Golden can or maybe Jaden Reed, as we saw during that stretch when Jordan Love was hot in 2023, maybe that changes things a little bit. But I think that this defense is very underrated. They're very good. The run game is obviously amazing, as Josh Jacobs proved last year. And so Jordan Love is not a game manager, but he's a glorified game manager, so not exactly the most exciting fantasy quarterback. So to Heath's point, he's a great guy to pair with a volatile number 1 guy that, has boom bust potential. And if you want to get that 18 to 20 point production, that's the kind of guy you're going to get.
All right. Good show, guys. All right. We're going to do a ranking.
Did you guys see the first game of the year?
Oh, no. What is it?
Cowboys, Eagles.
Ooh, that's a fun one. Where is it?
September 4th.
Where is it?
It's in
Philly.
It's in Nome, Alaska.
Oh, the Thursday game. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the Brazil. Where's the international game this year?
There's
the
a bunch of
Ireland.
Friday night one.
I believe it's Brazil.
I think that's Chiefs Chargers, right?
That's what I heard.
In Brazil?
Okay.
Ireland. Does Steelers have an opponent yet, or we'll find out this week?
Oh no, there's a rumored opponent for them.
Yeah, we do have the schedule releases.
It's actually the Vikings, I think. Vikings Steelers.
Where you gonna go?
No.
We're
If I'm going over to Ireland, I'm going over there to play golf.
We can do both. You go play golf. You watch Aaron Rodgers versus the Vikings. I mean, that's gonna be awesome.
Dave, I don't know if this quote is going through your head, but where are you going to go, Garth? You going to go to Ireland? Because I'm the leprechaun. Remember in Wayne's World 2 when he's like tormenting Garth? No. Okay, listen, I've got 3 things tonight. What do you think the order of importance in terms of wins are?
Knicks better be one for you.
I got softball, I've got tennis, and I've got the Knicks game. What do you think? You think Knicks are 1?
If the Knicks aren't one for you, then don't ever watch a game again.
I don't even care. The Knicks are
your season.
They're not going to win. They have no chance. Like I am given up.
They have no chance, but they're up 2-1 in the series, guys.
Well, some fan you are.
I've given up on them.
So I'm trying to think of your happiness. I'd probably go softball, tennis, Knicks. Because softball, you can hope that your teammates carry you to victory.
Yeah.
Tennis, you have to rely on yourself. And then the Knicks, you have to rely on the Knicks. So I'd probably hope on the softball teammates.
Are you still the last hitter on the worst team in the league?
I don't know if we're the worst team anymore, but yeah, I am the last hitter. It's embarrassing. I'm so bad at softball. Just so bad.
Any errors yet?
Yeah. Are you kidding? They don't call me E4 for nothing. You didn't hear the first game of the year we won, or the second game. We won a doubleheader. The second game of the doubleheader. 2 outs in the 6th, whatever it is, 7th. I don't even know. Pop up to win the game, to get our first win. And I dropped it. Dropped the pop up. And now the ball was hit off the end of the bat and it was kind of spinning, but it was pathetic. And then I think the next 2 hitters reached base and I was like, oh my God, we're going to blow the game. It's going to be completely my fault. And then we struck out the batter to end the game. It was great.
Do they only keep you around because you're semi-famous?
Semi-famous. I'm sure they don't want me there anymore. It's
Is this your last year playing softball?
I don't know. I love the guys. Like, they were such good friends. It's like
Maybe you could be the manager.
I'm not that bad at fielding. I'm not that bad.
Are you the worst fielder on the team?
You just talked about dropping a pop-up at second base.
I also caught some pop-ups. No, I'm not the worst. I'm not the worst fielder on the team. And I'm actually a very good base runner, even though I got thrown out on a terrible base running play last week. But,
oh my God. So wait. The day after Mother's Day, you're going to play 2 sporting events and watching a game.
So I am DVRing the game and hoping that I can somehow avoid my phone. But yeah, I'm going to be out all night. Yeah.
You think you're going to be playing softball in the New York area?
Softball, no. Softball, we'll all be watching it on the bench, like checking in on it. But the game's at 7:30. Softball's at 7. After softball, I'll know the score at halftime. And that's pretty much it. And then I'll hopefully play tennis, not check my phone, come home, watch the rest of the game. They'll be down by 20 at halftime anyway, so it won't even matter. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful night, except for Heath.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. We will talk to you on Wednesday with players who are the toughest to rank on fantasy football today.